Here you are. Yeah. And so maybe we can just start by getting comfortable in your space, finding maybe a pose that's supportive for you at this moment. And let's start by checking in with the body and just notice how your body's doing, seeing if it needs anything right now. Maybe just adjusting a little bit. And as you sit here for our practice, just notice if there's any tension anywhere or any tightness. If the body sometimes can get very rigid when we say we're going to meditate. And so notice that attention and see if your attention is soft or if it's rigid. And see if you can just kind of soften up a little bit. Meeting your experience exactly as it is. Maybe taking in a deeper than normal breath with me. Exhaling long. Yeah. And one more time, filling up that belly. And exhaling long. Yeah. And if you need to, maybe doing that one last time, filling up that belly. And exhaling long. Now just seeing if you can allow the breath to flow normally. See if there's a need to control or change in any way. And let's just start by settling into this body by noticing the body here, this body breathing. And as we do that, now seeing if you can tap into this kind observer of your experience, this loving presence. Maybe I can invite you to tune into somebody that you might know, somebody that maybe you can imagine that holds this sense of loving presence, this non-judgmental attitude. It could be a pet, a being in nature, superhero, or just anyone that you feel that has that sense when you're around them. And no matter what you're experiencing, you will be held. You will be heard. And now just notice what it's like when the being is around. Notice how you feel when you're in their presence. This non-judgmental attitude, this kind curiosity. Becoming aware of their qualities. Their energy. Now bringing that sense of how you feel around them to this moment. And if you can be with your experience in the same way. Maybe this being has a very relaxed demeanor, or maybe they're just a kind listener. Maybe they're just loving and fluffy if it's a pet. Maybe it's just a stable presence. So really taking in this way of being for yourself right now. Now turning towards your experience right now, maybe there's a lot of thinking. Maybe there's a lot of narrative. And seeing if you can just hold your experience with this non-judgmental, loving attitude. What is that like for you? The thoughts, the emotions, the sensations in the body. Just allowing this loving presence to carry you throughout our practice today. Noticing when judgment rises, coming back to this kind, loving presence. Becoming a kind observer of your experience. And meeting yourself exactly as you are right now. Welcoming all of you. So if you're noticing a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts, the mind is distracted, telling you stories. Just look at those stories. Just notice the thoughts. Without getting carried away, but just noticing, having this non-judgmental attitude towards it. Just being here with this thinking activity of the mind. And seeing if any nurturing words come up. Maybe you can say, I get it. You're having a hard time settling. I see you. Whatever words might come to you. What happens during the pause? Where does the mind go? So seeing if you can just really gently kind of score your attention right back to just noticing the thoughts arise. Noticing how they come up, they linger for a little bit, and then they pass. And then another thought comes up. Holding it all in this loving awareness. With a sense of deep acceptance for your experience right now. And every time you catch the wandering mind is a time to celebrate. It's a mindful moment. And if you notice judgment for how long it took, or where have you been, it's okay. Just noticing the judgment as another thought. Seeing if we can bring a non-judgmental attitude towards this experience. And then just notice what it's like to be this way towards your experience, to be in this sense of non-judgmental attitude, loving presence. What is that like for you? How does your body feel when you're in this state? And sometimes, if you're noticing that the mind is really distracted, you can always come back to your breath from time to time and just notice the breath and then go back to noticing the thinking mind. And perhaps you can notice when this loving presence, this kind observer, this attitude is not present in you at this moment. You're in this practice. Perhaps a lot of energy in the body, wanting to just leave, or boredom. And can you turn this kind eye towards it? Can you just look at it, be with it, hold it, as if it was a baby fuzzing? So Juan Ramon Jimenez, in a poem called Oceans, says, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against the great thing, and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens, or has everything happened? And are we standing now quietly in the new life? So maybe I can invite you to take a deeper than normal breath. Long exhale again. Coming back to this body now, sensing through the body. Becoming aware of all sensation here. Noticing what it needs right now. Does it need to move a little bit? Does it need to stretch a little bit? And just allowing this movement to come deep from within, instead of reacting to something that's here. Seeing what you need right now. So before you even move, maybe pausing, getting a sense of accepting what's happening, and then bringing this beginner's mind into what's possible. And then from this place, you can shift. Maybe you need to take a deeper than normal breath. Maybe you need to move. And then whenever you're ready at your own pace, you can start opening your eyes if they're still closed. And seeing if you can look past the screen, looking at your environment, seeing what's around. And perhaps even here, you can notice how the mind starts looking for something. Seeing if that can also relax a little bit into just being, to allowing your gaze to really softly just land somewhere. And then whenever you're ready, you can come back to the screen. Look at everybody that's here. And seeing if you can sense into a sense of gratitude towards yourself for being here, for practicing. from being open to noticing. So today, today's the talk is inspired by a participant from my MBSR class last week, and I think it brings a little bit of this attitudinal foundation that we're practicing, which is beginner's mind, and in the way that they were practicing, we were actually at class 6 on MBSR, which is communication. And in this practice, after class, this participant shared with me that she had encountered some kind of situation in which she felt that there was a lack of gratitude towards someone, and she was an observer of this thing that happened, and she felt there was a lack of gratitude from a person that was in this event, and so it kind of brought us back. We explored a little bit, and it brought us back to this sense of beginner's mind, this sense of Gregory Kramer speaking of mindful communication, insight dialogue, which is something that we've practiced here as well. And it's something that I do my best to remember when I'm in communication. And as we explore this, there was a moment right there in which she was able to pause in this perception that this other person had been really ungrateful. And in this pause, she found that she was really activated by what had happened. And so insight dialogue and our practice really invites us to do that, to really pause and to notice our experience, right? And insight dialogue, it also invites us to relax. And this is not a forceful thing. This is not about, oh, I have to relax my body, but it's more about noticing if there is tension, tightness, what is happening in your experience at this moment. And Gregory Kramer often says that acceptance is to the mind as relaxation is to the body. And so the sense of accepting your experience, accepting that maybe there is an activation here. And every time something becomes bigger than what it is, then most likely that's coming from deep within. Now, Dr. Gabor Mate usually says, where there is trauma, there is trauma. And in this context, maybe trauma is not what we always think, like the big T. Maybe it's just something milder, something that really caused an impression as a child. And so the sense, again, with insight dialogue of pausing, relaxing, and then being open to the experience, being open invites us to kind of create this personal space for ourselves, an interpersonal space with the person that we might be dealing with, right? It also invites this sense of beginner's mind into our own experience. So often we think that, okay, I have to have beginner's mind towards this other person, but how about noticing the sense of beginner's mind with ourselves? And how are you holding yourself in moments like this? Right? And so in this particular event, exploring this, we realized that there was a sense of judgment, right? When we say, well, you're being ungrateful, you're being this, you're being that. In some way, this is not allowing us to take responsibility for how we feel, right? And this is all that came out with this talk, this sharing that was really, really rich that we had. And yeah, maybe there is a sense there that something needs to be going a certain way, and it's not. And so exploring that a little bit, she realized that the sense of being grateful was something that it was stalled in her mind from very, very early in life. And so this is a moment for really growth when these things happen, right? This is a moment in which we can notice, why is this so impactful for me? We're not saying that the situation might have been right or wrong. We're not saying that this person was acting a certain way that maybe wasn't acceptable, right, at the moment. We're not talking about that right now. We're just bringing our experience first to how we feel. Action can come from wisdom, but it can only come from wisdom after we have the time to really notice what's happening. Because what this participant noticed was that when she reached out to the person to tell them what they were doing and how ungrateful they might have been, that was coming from a place of making things right. There was an agenda there. And there was, what we noticed too, is that there was a lack of curiosity. And if we're not curious about what's happening, then that means we're in a judgmental attitude. So notice in the next time you're in conversation with someone or something happens, notice if this curiosity rises, like, why did this person do that? What was happening with them? Right? What caused for them to actually act this way? And can we inquire about that? Right? Can we say, like, what's happening with you? So that's a very different dialogue than if we come in preachy or telling somebody how they should be or what they're doing wrong, right? And so really takes our own self-regulation first, our own knowing our experience first, right? So that's something that we were exploring, and I wanted to share with you because it was very fruitful for me as well. I learned a lot from that conversation. And as I always say, I learn a lot from all of you. And so I learned a lot about my own life, my own patterns. And just today, as we were coming into this lesson, I was running up and down and I could notice, how agitated I was. And then I was kind of like asking my partner, for the internet, and my partner couldn't hear me. And I could notice that I was getting agitated because you were all waiting. So I had to pause for a moment and just notice, like, what's happening before I could even say anything to him. I had to pause and say, like, okay, this is what's happening in my experience right now, and acknowledge where I was before I could even ask for anything from anyone else. So to be able to give ourselves this kind presence can be really helpful, because in that, if we come from that place of holding ourselves with loving presence at that moment, then that is going to show up when we have a conversation with someone about whatever it might be that might be causing this, sense of stress. But first, we have to be able to give ourselves that. And that's what I'm learning. If I can't give myself that, then I can't come to someone and say, like, why are you acting that way, or what's happening? There's no curiosity there. All I'm doing is trying to make things right by me. And so I hope this makes sense. It's just a little something that I wanted to share with you. And it brings me to a story. There's actually a story that I've read before, but it's very much into this theme. And it's a story of the two monks and a woman. And it says that a senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. And at one point, they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and beautiful woman also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. Two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows to not touch a woman. And then without a word, the older monk rushed in, picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless. And an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3, and finally the younger monk couldn't contain himself any longer and blurted out, as monks were not permitted a woman, how could you then carry that woman on your shoulders? The older monk looked at him and replied, Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her? So I thought maybe I'll leave you with a little something. And yeah, just something to ponder, something to think about. I hope that makes sense. And I thank you for your kind listening. I thank you for your support and with my practice, because you support me with my practice as well, and for your teachings, because I draw from everything I learned from you. So thank you. Thank you.